Teacher talking sports, what it does, what do, how we live. And let's continue the series I've been doing, NFL Mount Rushmore, where I name who I believe are the four best players in each decade. Started with the 2010s going backwards. Man, have all these been difficult, and the 1960s certainly was not easy as well. Had to leave off some wonderful players, but in alphabetical order by last name, the four guys I decided to include are Jim Brown, Deacon Jones, Bob Lilly, and Bart Starr. Now, the two hardest guys to leave off were Johnny Unitas. I thought for sure I was going to put him on. His three championships all came just outside of the 60s. I think they were 58, 59, and 70. Had a couple down seasons in the decade as well. Those four guys I named were consistently good throughout the decade, although one didn't play the whole decade. But Lance Allworth was another difficult guy to leave off. One of the most productive wide receivers, especially in his era. But some other honorable mentions include Dick Butkus, didn't play the whole decade. Jim Taylor, Len Dawson, Don Maynard, Merlin Olsen, Fran Tarkington, Forrest Gregg, Jim Parker, and Jim Otto, to name a few. Some all-time legends of the 60s, but I could only include four, and man, was this hard. But let's start, again, alphabetical order by last name, with Jim Brown. Now, Jim Brown only played 6 seasons in the decade, from 1960 to 1965, but man, were they good. In those 6 seasons, Brown rushed for 8,514 yards, 66 touchdowns, 5.3 yards a carry, 103.8 rushing yards per game. Also added 206 receptions for 2,116 yards, 18 touchdowns, so 84 total touchdowns. Was the MVP his last season of the league, 1965. Also finished runner-up twice. 5 of the 6 seasons in the decade, he was a first-team All-Pro, and he made the Pro Bowl each of the 6 seasons. In 5 of the 6 seasons, Brown led the league in rushing. These were 14-game seasons, and in 1963, he ran for 1,863 yards. Twice led the league in rushing touchdowns, had 3 seasons with double-digit rushing touchdown marks, twice led in yards per carry, including a stellar 6.4 yards per pop in 1963. Again, did a lot of damage in the receiving game. 2 seasons with over 40 catches, 4 seasons with over 30 catches, 4 seasons led the league in yards from scrimmage, all 6 of the seasons. At least 1,461 yards from scrimmage, and again, was just a 14-game season at the time. Jim Brown's 1964 club won the NFL championship. It was pre-Super Bowl era. But yes, despite just playing 6 seasons, I had to include Jim Brown on my 1960s Mount Rushmore. Next, one of the most feared pass rushers in NFL history. I'm talking Deacon Jones. And what's crazy is Jones was selected in the 14th round, 186th overall in the 1961 NFL Draft. But played from 1961 to 1969 with the Rams. In that time, now sacks were not an official stat, but Pro Football Reference credits him for 143 sacks in those 9 seasons. Defensive Player of the Year was not a thing then, but for 5 straight years from 1965 to 1969, Jones was a first-team All-Pro. Had MVP finishes of 2nd and 6th from 1964 to 1969. He was also named to the Pro Bowl. Again, sacks were not an official stat, but 14-game seasons throughout his career. He had 3 seasons where he's credited with over 20 sacks. 2 seasons of 22, 1964 and 1968. 21 and a half in 1967. He had 4 other seasons in the decade where he was credited with at least 12 sacks. I mean, when it comes to sacks per game, especially during the decade, 126 games, 143 sacks, well over a sack per game. Again, one of the most historic pass rushers in NFL history, a first ballot Hall of Famer in 1980. Deacon Jones, the second member of my 1960s Mount Rushmore. Next, let's go to another defensive player, defensive tackle. That is Bob Lilly. Lilly was selected with the 13th overall pick by the Cowboys in the 1961 NFL Draft. Played 9 seasons in the decade, all with the Dallas Cowboys. Credited for 77 sacks in that time. First team All-Pro each of the last 6 seasons in the decade from 1964 to 1969. Also had MVP finishes of 4th and 7th. Was named to the Pro Bowl from 1964 to 1969 and 1962. Pro Football Reference credits him with 3 seasons with double-digit sacks, including 1966 when he had a career high of 15. Again, Defensive Player of the Year not a thing at this time, or else he probably would have had some very high finishes. The Cowboys did not win a Super Bowl or an NFL championship in the decade that he played, but Bob Lilly did win a championship in 1971, but not part of this. But nonetheless, seen as one of the best defensive tackles of all time, I included him in my Mount Rushmore for defensive tackles. All these NFL Mount Rushmores are in a playlist, as are other sports. But anyhow, first ballot Hall of Famer in 1980, Bob Lilly, third member of my 1960s NFL Mount Rushmore. And let's end with the one quarterback on here. That is the great Bart Starr, another super late pick. 17th round, 200th overall in the 1956 NFL Draft. Played the whole decade with the Green Bay Packers. So in that time, of course, passing numbers weren't quite as good as they are in today's game. Much more pass-friendly league than it was back then. But in the decade, Starr went 81, 32, and 4 as a starter with a 58.9 completion percentage, 125 touchdowns, and an 87.7 rating. Starr was named the league's MVP in 1966. Of course, was a first-team All-Pro as well. Had 4 seasons where he was named to the Pro Bowl. A lot of bold ink on his page for the decade. 4 times led the league in completion percentage. I mean, over 60 was impressive. All 4 of those seasons had over a 60% completion percentage. Led the league in rating 4 times, over 100 was fabulous. 2 of those seasons he had over a 100 rating. Again, in that era, absolutely incredible. Didn't throw a lot of picks, a lot of seasons. 3 times led the league in lowest interception percentage. But of course, much of Bart Starr's damage was done in the playoffs. So lost his first career playoff game in 1960, but then went on to win 9 in a row. So a 9-1 playoff record all in the decade. 5-time champion in the decade, including the first 2 Super Bowls in the 1966 and 1967 seasons. In those, he was named Super Bowl MVP both times. In his playoff career, again, 9-1 record, 61 completion percentage, 15 touchdowns, just 3 interceptions, a 104.8 rating. Bart Starr, one of the most clutch quarterbacks in league history, still remembered quite fondly all these decades later. He is the 4th and final member of my 1960s NFL Mount Rushmore. Let me know in the comments if you agree, disagree. Again, was very hard to leave off guys like Unitas and Lance Allworth. I think it was like 1958 to 1967. A guy like Unitas definitely would have made it. Someone like Dick Butkus only played half the decade from 65 to 69, but someone like Merlin Olsen made numerous Pro Bowls. Jim Parker, one of the best guards of all time. Again, not easy, but stay tuned for tomorrow. I'll do the 1950s. I'm not sure when I'm going to end. Maybe the 1940s. I'll decide soon. But anyhow, don't forget to subscribe. Tell a friend, tell a friend, tell a friend to subscribe. Like the video, share the video, hit the bell for notifications. I'm out.